And now back to Bobby Likis Car Clinic and your host, Bobby Likis.
And welcome back to Bobby Likis Car Clinic. It's been a fast-paced show today, folks, and I'll be back with your call soon. But first, on Car Clinic Hotline with us now is ERIC BIZEK, star of Velocity TV's, get this, JDM Legends, which airs Tuesday nights at 9 p.m. on Velocity. ERIC, welcome to Bobby Likis Car Clinic. Glad to have you in the house.
Hey, Bobby, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is really great, man. Tell our Car Clinic listeners and viewers a little bit about what JDM means and what first attracted you to this category.
Okay, so first off, JDM stands for Japanese Domestic Market. Now, what that means in my little automotive world is that is specifically something that was made or sold or designed specifically for the Japanese market. So as that applies to the cars that I'm working on, what I refer to is cars that they offered in Japan that were never offered here in the States. So cars like the older Nissan Skylines, we have like the Mazda Cosmos Sport, and even some of the models they did sell here, like the Celicas or the Z cars, were substantially different in Japan. Usually they kept all the best stuff for themselves, and we kind of got watered down versions of what was available over there. So,
I can believe that.
That being said, we found that there is a stipulation in the law that allows you to import a car from Japan as long as it's 25 years old or older. Oh. So, we saw all this cool stuff we've always wanted, for so long, and we said, hey, you know what? Let's start bringing them over and just, see how it goes. And that's kind of how we started. And,
wow.
Just started bringing over cars and then doing the restoration work and reselling.
So
and we also do American market Japanese cars as well.
So, ERIC, how long have you been restoring JDM cars, and how did you become known nationwide as the JDM guy?
That's a pretty good question. I've been, working on cars for probably, I guess I should first start off. I'm 39 years old, and I've been working on cars for about 25 of those years, and I've been restoring the older cars for about 10 years now. I couldn't really tell you how we got on this worldwide platform. I guess I just got into the right place at the right time, but I think another part of it was that we were doing something that nobody else was doing at the time, restoring some of these cars that a lot of people didn't even know existed. When we're talking about cars like the Nissan Skyline GTR, some guys think that was something that was started in the 90s, but the first body style was actually in 1969. That's when that car started, and it's such an incredible car with such a, amazing racing pedigree that, we thought, let's bring them over.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I want to ask you a little bit about some parts a little bit later on, but first, the JDM vehicles have really become very popular lately. Why do you think that what you're doing there is so popular and how it's growing so fast? That has to be a phenomenon, really.
Yeah, I think it really is, and I've been really shocked to kind of see it grow since we've started, because when we first started, it was like, pretty slow to catch up. But, I think another thing that may play a part of this is I think the demographic of the collector car market is changing a little bit, and I think that's, going to happen as we get older. But, I'm now dealing with a slightly different demographic that grew up with a different set of cars than maybe some of the, older generations did. So whereas, typical collectors wanted, a certain type of cars, these muscle cars or European cars. There's also this new segment, that grew up with old Datsuns and old Nissans and old Toyotas, and that's what they want to reconnect with now that they've got, the funds for maybe that third weekend car. So I think we've seen the collector car market change a little bit to what they're looking for and what they want is their car. And the problem we see is that these old Japanese cars, they don't really age well. And there was also, sort of this stigma with a lot of them that they were almost like throwaway cars. They were so cheap, like the Datsun 510, for example. It was one of these cars where you would drive it into the ground and then you would send it to the scrapyard. Nobody ever really thought that they would be worth anything,
sure.
In some instances. So we find ourselves with a little bit of a supply and demand issue here, and trying to find good chassis are hard to come by.
Well, no doubt that you have reached a market that is of course, appealing to a younger and an older group. For instance, I bought a new 89 280 Nissan SX, which was one of the best cars, best running cars. It was indestructible. At least I thought it was at the time. We're talking with ERIC BIZEK, star of JDM Legends on Velocity TV. So, Eric, share with our Car Clinic listeners and viewers some of the cars that we'll see in the first season of JDM Legends.
Yeah, so, like I said, the Skylines are one of these cars that we deal with a lot here. That was something that is sort of that holy grail for, older Japanese car enthusiasts that we never had. So that is definitely one car that we specialize in. So we do restore a couple of different models on there, from the lower base models all the way up to, the really sought-after GTR model. We also do a few, American market Japanese cars as well. I found an old Z car in a shed here in Salt Lake City, and we, kind of was left for dead, and we bring that one back to life. And my style of restoration is a little bit different, and I think, in this Japanese community, the restorations can be dealt with in a little bit of a different way, where I like to modify them a little bit. Mm-hmm. They're really great cars out of the box, but there's so much potential in the car, and with a few of the right, tasteful, proper modifications, they can be so much more fun to drive. So, that for me is another kind of fun part of it, is to not only take something and make it better than it was, but also, kind of personalize it a little bit. But, you always have to be careful when you're doing that, because, you want to do it in the right way that's paying tribute to the car and not turning it into something that it was never intended to be.
I think that's a very subjective approach, and I hear where you're going there. So during your process of restoring a JDM vehicle, you have to be challenged as to how to bring the car back to their authentic factory state. But it sounds to me as though you do that overall, but you still upgrade, like the suspension. Where do you draw the line there?
It all kind of depends on the model of car we're working at. Some cars, I believe should be left completely stock. There's certain cars that you just don't modify, and I think that goes for, all different types of makes and models. But then there's other models where, I think it's okay to change things up a little bit. So, that being said, like on the Z car, for example, this blue car that we had built, that car from the factory came with 150 horsepower, a 2.4-liter motor. With a little bit of Frankensteining of parts together, we used the diesel crank from the Nissan Maxima, which is worth more than the entire car itself these days. And we've stroked it to a 3.2-liter and makes 320 horsepower now, wow. Which, in a 2,400-pound chassis is absolutely amazing to drive. And a lot of it kind of comes down to, once you've got that sort of a motor in there, you definitely don't want to be running on the stock non-vented brakes. So it only makes sense to sort of modify some of those areas. And the reason that really attracted me to Japanese cars in the first place is the handling. That's something that is, I think, really differentiates these from some of the, North American cars that we were getting, where they were very much focused on straight line speed. The beauty of these cars is that, they weren't always the most powerful thing, but they're lightweight. They had, really advanced suspension designs, and they're so much fun to drive in the turns that, my whole view for this is to, when you're doing a build, have an overall balanced approach. So if you're going to be putting in a big motor, you've got to have, the brakes and suspension and everything else to kind of back that up. We're looking for something that's very well-rounded. Do
you sell these cars? And if so, what can someone expect to pay for an authentic JDM-built car?
The price range varies pretty drastically. For example, on some of the Skyline models, they're getting very rare now. And one of your GT models, the lower-end single-cam models, would be around, $65,000 to $85,000, whereas the GTR model is now going up into, close to $250,000. So, it's kind of maybe crazy for some people to think that, wow, Japanese cars can actually be worth that much. But, the marketplace is there, and we also have to think about the place that we're sourcing them from. These cars to them are their hero cars. These cars were, treated like, the Mustangs or the Camaros of the United States. So right. There's also, that collector side of the market we deal with as well.
Mm-hmm. I understand. ERIC BIZEK, star of JDM Legends on Velocity TV. So Eric, let me be sure here. JDM Legends airs on Velocity at 9 p.m. on Tuesday nights. That's 9 p.m. Eastern Time. So, folks, you have to tune in and see the types of vehicles and just all of the neat things that Eric does. Eric, great to have you on the show today. Perhaps we'll get you back on Car Clinic again. Thank you so much for sharing your story of sort of how you got to where you are and what we can expect to see on Velocity TV. Thanks for joining us on Bobby Likis Car Clinic.
Hey, well, thank you for having me, Bobby. I'd love to come back sometime.